Women on the Frontlines. This is Wendy Peter, your Global Director, and we are into our next week of our summer devotional, She is the Storm. And this week we're focusing on the topic of faithfulness. And as it happens, I'm coming to you from a project I'm working on this summer where it's taken a lot of faithfulness for me to see this through. My mom actually had a stroke this spring, and we had to suddenly move her out of her home. And she was not able to renovate it, to get it ready to sell. And so as her daughter, I made the decision to step up and say, I'm going to do this for you. And of course, it's easy to say things. It's harder to do them, right? Once you get into it, there's lots of complications and things going on. And so I've been plodding away this summer instead of, being able to go to the beach and that as I usually do. I've been being faithful to my family. So I have a few thoughts this morning I want to share with you about faithfulness. There was a wonderful spiritual father in Canada named David Maines, and he had this expression, the kingdom goes to those who show up. I have found that to be true as a leader. We have all kinds of women who come through, women on the front lines with amazing gifts. And gifts are wonderful. It's wonderful when someone comes through who, has amazing talents and they can do this and they can do that. But guess who stays? The faithful. Guess who I end up choosing and promoting into positions of influence? The faithful. Why is that? Even the Bible says, when Paul is writing to Timothy, find men who can teach, who are faithful. And so faithfulness is when we make a commitment and we see it through to the end. And it's being able to be counted on. We're living in a world where people just get a divorce after a year because, it was a little bit harder than they expected. And it allows it to the point where there's no weight behind what they said when they gave their vows, right? They made these vows before God. I'll, be with you till death do us part, or until I just don't like it one day and I'll leave, you see? So faithfulness is actually when we make a commitment and we see it through. And, ministry is not an easy thing. Ministry is difficult. And at times, there's challenges financially, there's challenges relationally, there's challenges and opposition. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but principalities and powers and rulers over darkness. And what faithfulness does for you in that time is it allows you to stay the course. When you have learned to yield to the power of faithfulness in you, because He is faithful. The Bible even says when we are faithless, He will be faithful. When we give up, He won't give up on us. So learning to yield to faithfulness and to say, my words have to have weight. When I say I'll do something, people should be able to count on it. I've been teaching in our Leadership Academy now for several years, and that runs from September till June, and I teach several classes a week. And I think it's only one time in all of that time that I actually was sick and said, I can't teach this class this week. And the reason is I've decided to be faithful, right? This is something that has a high priority and it matters. So I'm going to give you a couple of keys this morning to increasing faithfulness. How do you pull on faithfulness, in your spirit so that you see it through? And one of the ways you do that is you establish what matters. When somebody's late all the time and they don't show up and they, their commitment is wishy-washy, they haven't established that thing means a lot to them, have they? Right? It doesn't have a lot of weight. I say when we're talking about faithfulness, with leaders and we're trying to develop people to show up and to let their commitment be large and important, I say, I know that if you were given $1,000 to show up at a meeting, you would be there. So what is it telling us when you don't show up? It means it didn't matter to you. So, and I'm not saying that there's not times where things happen, but I'm talking habitually unfaithful, right? And the Bible actually says in Proverbs, the way of the unfaithful is hard. And so there's a beautiful gift that comes with faithfulness, which is things are easier. Why? Because we can count on people. We can count on ourselves. We've made a commitment to show up. And I want to tell you a little story today about one of my leaders who is very faithful. I said, the kingdom goes to those who show up. Well, one of our leaders, Vita Panico, she joined me, pretty early on when I took on Women on the Front Lines from Patricia King. And, I was looking for some help with the ministry, and I really wanted a prayer leader in the beginning. And apparently, the Lord put on her heart, she tells the story that the Lord put on her heart to offer to help. And she was expecting me to say I didn't need help. She was like, I am too busy. I can't offer her to help, but I will if you want me to, Lord. So she sent me this notice saying, a little email saying, can I help you? And I said, yes, this is what you can do. And so she came in the door, and Vita was faithful. She was faithful. She showed up, and she showed up, and she showed up. She showed up in the good times when there was opportunities to be on the platform. She showed up in the hard times when there was difficulties and struggles. She stayed in the room. She showed up to work. She stayed up. At least I was told, her and one of our other leaders were up till 2, 3, 4 in the morning during our big conference we had in Nashville, just getting things done. I set her up as a conference leader. She was faithful. Now, what happened out of that is promotion comes to the faithful. Promotion comes to the faithful. It's all through the scriptures. There's a story of the talents. Who is faithful in little will be given rule over much. So after she had served with me for several years, the Lord promoted her. He opened the door for her to go to Europe. And that's an amazing opportunity. She had a property in her family that she inherited, and she was able to move in there, and she began to minister in Europe. And again, being faithful, and she sold everything she had to go there. It wasn't like it was easy, right? And she got there, and there's no discernible way to support herself, and yet she was faithful. So what happens? God is faithful. I was talking to her a couple of weeks ago, maybe even longer back, and she was telling me that God had given her a vision. She came in and she didn't know what she was going to do. And this is the interesting thing about faithfulness. She didn't know how to reach Europe. She didn't know how to reach Italy. That's where she was starting. She just was being faithful. She continued to pray. She continued to show up. And when we do that, we make room for God to show us what to do. We make room for God to give us a plan. If we just quit as soon as it's hard, if we just walk out because, nothing's happening, I'm going on to the next ministry, we'll never get anywhere. But she's determined, I'm going to see this through. So she began to get a vision to have 24-hour prayer in Europe. There was, I think, a prophetic word given by Cindy Jacobs that she felt needed to be fulfilled, and she didn't know how to do that. Again, just being faithful. I'm just going to be faithful, Lord. And eventually he gave her a vision. She was fasting, and she was to go to each province and pray. And she was telling me about a week ago that in her being faithful, didn't know how to do it, and just going to go to each province and pray, she came across a lady who is already running 24/7 prayer. Isn't that interesting? And it's something she didn't even know how to get off the ground. See, the way of the unfaithful is hard, but the way of the faithful is favored. It's easier. And so she's got this whole thing keeps moving forward, you see? And this is what happens when we decide to be faithful. I had a spiritual father who asked me this question. He said, Wendy, what would happen if you were to make a 50-year commitment to a ministry that no matter what happened, you wouldn't quit? What could you grow? And that really provoked me. He asked me that when I was younger, and he said, because there's going to come an opportunity to you someday where you get an opportunity to steward something, and you can either be like the other people where you just do it for a little while and you're always looking for something better, or you could dig in and you could be faithful and you could grow it and see what happens. So when I took on Women on the Frontlines, when Patricia King passed it down to me, I said to her, I'm going to be faithful to this, Patricia. I will do this for the rest of my life until it's time for me to retire and pass it to the next generation. And that way, when the hard days come, you can't knock me out. You see, that's the other key about faithfulness. When you've chosen faithfulness, when the hard days come, the enemy can't knock you out because quitting is not an option. So when you're faithful, quitting is not an option. I'm faithful to my husband. We're in our marriage together. Quitting's not an option. So when we have hard days together, we don't go, that's it, we're done. We say, we need to work this out. Does that make sense? So this is what I want to call on you today to begin to yield to. So making a quality decision that you're going to stick to something and see it through. Making a decision once you've said, I'm going to be faithful. That means when the hard days come, I don't give up. It's not an option. I've made a quality decision to this ministry, to this business, to this call, to this marriage, to this friendship, whatever that is. And so I'm going to work it out. And we learn to pull on that from the inside because our emotions are telling us to quit. Our emotions are telling us there's no money, there's no time, there's no support, there's no this, there's no that. And see, do you notice that faithfulness is then a bridge to faith? It's a bridge to trusting the Lord in the times where everything's going wrong. When we're faithful, we give God time to bring us into the next chapter and the next thing he's doing. So that's my challenge for you this week. Our lady is going to be talking to you about faithfulness, and I want to call on you to make those quality decisions. I'm looking for women on the front lines who are faithful, who will continue to show up week after week and build the kingdom together and cheer each other on to greatness. And when we do that, God can really work in us and through us. So thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next week. Take care.